WCLN 1170 Radio and Cable Channel 16 are pleased to present We Should Know, hosted by J.W. Simmons, an upbeat, informative look at people, places, and issues facing our community. This education-based analysis of issues will remain positive and informative as we consider closely what we should know.
Welcome back. I'm J.W. Simmons, your host. We're talking about public education today and some of the challenges that folks are looking at, from being a parent to being a student, expectation, reality, new school buildings, and somebody that is in the middle of all of that. And Dr. Jamie King, Superintendent of Sampson County Schools.
I have noticed the difference is in our educators, our teachers. It's not just a job. Like, they care about their kids. They care about what they're teaching. They care about what they're doing. You go into our classrooms, you can see and feel that passion from educators who want to give and do their best. And I'll say, I don't know that you see that everywhere, right? In other districts I've been in, other schools, here there really is that caring about kids, caring about their successes, caring when things don't work, right? Kind of pulling back for a moment and saying, why didn't that work? What did we do wrong? Right. So I think just that dedication of our staff, of our employees, I think, it came out when we did our Hobbton High School stuff, just the passion of that community who really want something better and different for their students. And the amount of people who don't even have kids in our school district, but still care and still want to push us forward. I think that's been very comforting in a way, eye-opening, but such a positive thing that when you're surrounded with individuals who care that deeply, it makes my job so much easier.
I'm glad you mentioned the Hobbton School District, because I wanted to kind of segue into that. Just recently, you've gone through that process of looking at not only the need, but the ability or capacity to supply need for a building, a capital outlay up there. And we're talking millions of dollars. When that hit the media, I know there was a lot of folks excited about it. A lot of folks looked at it from the sense of that's been needed for a long time. Walk us through that process, because I think maybe some folks don't understand that that's not solidified at the moment as we see it. That's a huge process. And just kind of give us an idea of how you got there to be able to say, look, we have the resources if this happens.
So I think that also goes back a little bit to your first question about what's different. The state of North Carolina and, Department of Public Instruction have lots of grants out there. There's tons of money out there. It's doing work to get some of that money into our local district. And so the state has one grant called, Public Needs Assistance, and it's for building schools. And it was written for districts like Sampson County, for rural, smaller districts who aren't going to have $64 million, $74 million to build a new school. And so the state has set up this program every year. Districts can submit an application, apply for it. It's based on a rubric, so you kind of know going in what you would get points for, what you won't get points for. And I think, being here for 6 months, it was time. I'd heard from lots of people in the community. I've been out to our schools, seen what they look like. I think if we want to advance education in Sampson County, then we got to have a building that does that. And having a building that was built in 1957 doesn't meet the needs of what we're currently trying to do with students.
As we began to look at that, go down the path, you have to hire an engineer who does floor plans, schematics. You have to go to the county commissioners. There's a local match. It's different for each district. So the Department of Public Instruction works with tax revenue systems, and then they look at what's the need of a district to have this funding, right? A district that is high wealth doesn't need this. So there's some districts that aren't even allowed to apply for these funds of money. And then there's other districts like Sampson that can apply for almost 100% of the funds to build a new high school. And so we had to go to county commissioners to get a local, match request. And they were gracious enough to accept that request. And now we've submitted our application to the state. That was due last week. And now we just sit and wait and fingers crossed and hope that we've dotted all our I's and crossed all our T's well enough to put forth the reason that, Sampson County Schools needs those funds.
when you look at what I'm hearing you say is that certain blocks have to be checked off. Is there one critical component that you would say is a must-have to be able to have access to these funds?
So I would say it's what you do with your building. And so if we're just going to build a building that's the exact same as the building we have now, it's just new, there's no purpose in that, right? When we talk about building the building, we talk about what will the building do that our current building won't, right? And so one of the things we've talked about Hobbton is possibly having public service academies built into the building, right? So it becomes a magnet, a hub for any student that wants to go into fire, EMS, police, teaching, right? These public service academies. Well, if you want to teach high school students about fire, you can't do it in a traditional, 800 square foot classroom. You need different resources, access to different tools. If you want to teach students about EMS, right? You need a bay where an EMS truck can park, right? You need these things that our current building infrastructures just don't allow us to do, that you really need a building that's built around those types of things that you want to embed in your classes. And so I think when I talk about a new school, that's where I go to is what does the building do for us educationally that a current building would never do? What does it allow us for? What does it allow students to access when it comes to curriculum?
How much money are we talking about given everything falls into play here? How many million are we actually talking about actually complete this job?
Mm-hmm. So the grant is for $62 million, so that's what the state would give us. Local county commissioners have to put in a local match of a little over $4.2 million. It comes down to 5%, but it's kind of 5% as you go through the project, so it's not a just clear-cut 5% of $62 million. So they have to put in about $4.2 million. From there, we'll start to develop now site plans. So what will this cost, right? Right now we don't have the cost for an auditorium, right? We know that would be another $2 million. We want to upgrade our athletic fields to a little nicer complexes, right? That's going to cost $1 million to $3 million, depending on how nice you want to make those. So there's some other things that we'll have to have a little extra funding for, but we also are not to that place yet to have full dollars and cents and the exact costs. We'll go down that path once the state kind of determines if we're approved or if we're not approved. And if we're not approved, then we go right back into the grant cycle for next year and can submit the same grant application next year with those same funds and everything.
But you feel like as we're looking at it now, this moment in time, should I say, because everything's relative here, at this moment in time as we're looking at that pretty much all of those areas have been checked off, and now it's going to be up to the decision-making process. We've met the kind of tier county as far as income. We've met all those other things, and we're looking at around 60, time you add the county investment, around $67 million for this facility. The question, and if we need to go through break with this, we can, but the question is time sensitive being critical here. If this takes 2 or 3 or 4 years, would that not change the baseline simply because it appears everything continues to go up so rapidly? We may be looking at 67, 68 million, and now 3 years out, that's 72 or 73 million.
Yeah, so what helps is, when the state approves, hopefully, our application and we get those funds, we would immediately go into bidding out the project, and we would bid it with what's called a greatest maximum price, or a GMP. And so that is the engineers, everybody saying this is the maximum price that this building will cost. We cannot go over that. And that way you kind of secure yourself for a few years while you're building it, that inflation and all of those things can't change your bottom line price, that once you bid it out at the greatest maximum price, any change in orders, things like that come through have to be approved because you're going over that GMP or that greatest maximum price. And so that kind of helps us a little bit. But we would want, as soon as the state approves that, for us to go ahead and get started, because you're right, it'll take a 2 to 3 year building process for a new school. And that's just on top of once all the final floor plans are done, site inspections are done, the state gives us the go ahead. The Department of Public Instruction also has to review any floor plans, any changes to a building, because they're ultimately the ones who are giving us the go ahead to build that building. So all site plans have to go through DPI, so it's a very long, lengthy process.
it sounds to me like we're in a good position that this may happen. However, as we look at it and move forward with it, we're still looking at a process that could, I guess, maybe in the future, 27, 28, before we could actually see any beginning of actual construction and concrete.
Yeah, I think probably construction concrete would probably be 2025. I think, we have a year where we're still in January of 2024. So I do think a year out, we would have shovel and ground, dirt moving. It's just getting to that process, and how long those bids take. Especially in a smaller county like this, you have to have at least 2 companies bid, or you have to rebid, right? So every time you have to rebid, that's another 2 to 3 week process, right? So those things can delay the project a little bit, but as you go, every time you have to bid it, you have to rebid. And every time you put a bid out, you got to wait another 2 to 3 weeks, another 2 to 3 weeks because you have to rebid. And that's also part of what we're used to dealing with.
I'm going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back and continue this conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. Talk about a new process, building process right here in the county. We'll be back.
Eastern North Carolina is a beautiful place where we gladly choose to call home. And we strive to provide the best communications services. STAR is committed to improving communications to all our service areas because we want to improve the communities where we not only work, but also live. STAR Communications. We are neighbors serving neighbors.
Just because something may work doesn't mean it's right for your business. Let STAR Communications' knowledgeable consultants help you customize a hosted voice system that's right for you. Our dedicated experts work with you to understand your business needs and guide you at every step, from choosing and installing services to ongoing maintenance and support. Contact STAR today.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We're talking today on We Should Know to Dr. Jamie King, Superintendent of Sampson County Schools. Jamie, we're talking about Hobbton, the school, the project, $60+ million. That process, from what we discussed just now in the first part of the show, seems to be all in place. How confident are you that we're at the brink of this possibly actually happening on a scale of 1 to 10? Are we at 8, 4, 5, 9?
I feel like we're probably at an 8. So if you look at the rubric that the state puts out, we get 4 of the 5 bonus points. The only bonus points we don't get is closing 2 schools to make 1 school. So that would be like closing the middle school and the high school and then building a 6, 12, right, consolidating schools. That is not a path we wanted to go down and chose to go down. So I feel like our chances are an 8. I feel like we're pretty positive. I think our application is superb. I think the need is there, and I think we wrote that pretty eloquently in our application for why our community, why our students, why we need a new high school for Hobbton. So I'm pretty confident. We'll find out in March. The state takes a little while to make a determination, but once they make their decision, we'll know next steps. And the nice part is the application each year to year is very similar. So if we're not approved this year, then we can just kind of make some edits to our application and then resubmit next year and be in that same application portal for the new Hobbton.
These grant funds that we're talking about, when we're talking $60+ million, we're talking about significant grant funds. Is that coming from the legislature, from the federal level? Kind of give us an idea of how those funds are generated and where they're coming from. Yeah,
so they're all across the board. This one is a state fund. It's been around for several years. So it comes from legislators. Again, as I talked about at the beginning, it was really designed for small rural districts who just are never going to be able get a tax base to build a new school because we know how much they cost. And so that was really the purpose. But it's a state, our local legislators are the ones who put that into effect.
Do we hear these terms a lot, and one of them is marginalized and the other is underserved? Is that the type area that they're looking at for actually expenditures of these kinds of funds?
Yeah, so there are some in the rubric. It looks at, what are your demographics of your school? Is it an underserved socioeconomic status? Sampson County schools, 100% of our schools are free reduced lunch, Title I schools. So that definitely gives us a boost up when we're applying for any grant, really. It definitely helps us because that's normally one of the number one questions is what is your socioeconomic status of your district? And then what group of kids or what group of students is this grant going to affect? One like this, it's going to affect the entire district, I would argue, not just even Hobbton. It would affect everybody because then it gives you more choices for all of our students, not just for Hobbton students. And so that is part of it, is looking at what are the groups of students and the groups of your community that grant for this one, the public needs one, is going to really serve and help.
I know one of the things that's been discussed, and a lot of folks often ask about this, so I'm kind of empowered here to ask the question. As all given goes through well, and we obtain the funds, and we're looking at 2 or 3 years out or what have you to really get into that, are we looking at a property that currently exists, i.e. the building that's there now would be destroyed, or are we looking at an adjacent property that the building would be built on? What are the particulars with that? And kind of explain to folks how that came about and why you're looking at the way you're doing it.
Yeah, great question. Preference is to build it across the street. So we've been in conversations with the owner of that property about, possibly acquiring that. We wouldn't want to acquire that property until we know we get the grant, right? Because it does the school district no good to own property that we don't have a school building on. So I've been very upfront with county commissioners and everybody that, we will submit plans to the state that has that site, but just know we don't own that site yet, right? We could build the new Hobbton right behind the current building. So if we wanted to keep the land property that we currently own, we could build it directly behind Hobbton and then still be able to run the current Hobbton while we're building. Not my choice, only because it still has 3 schools. There's an elementary school, a high school, and then a middle school in line on one very busy street, highway. So if we build it across the street, I think that could help with traffic flow a lot, safety. I think it would allow the county some options with that property then that is the current Hobbton High School. It allows both the school district and possibly the county of Sampson to do some things with that, some mixed use things in the future, 10, 15 years down the road when we start to look at that. No matter what, though, when the new Hobbton would be built, we would have to tear down the current Hobbton, right? Just the cost that it takes to heat, air condition, leaks. You got to have people in the building to make sure, right? You don't just leave a building empty. So we would have to tear down the current Hobbton High School just to save money in utility bills and things like that. There's no point in having 2 buildings. Now, I think there's things that we've talked about of pieces of that building that we might save for a possible mixed use, possible sports arena, things like that could happen. But our choice is definitely to build the new Hobbton across the street versus the current site that it's on.
Are the current owners of the property across the street possibly willing to do that? Has that been touched on?
Yeah, so we've met with them multiple times, had conversations, just really don't want to continue down that and worry about the property until we know if we're getting the grant. Because if we don't get the grant, right, then it's waiting another year for anything to start. If we don't get that grant, then it's kind of reassessing where are we at as a district? What do we want to do? What are our next steps? So, but we've been in multiple conversations with them. They are very open to that property.
And they're very much part of the community, I think. So that's a huge plus as well. It's not like you're dealing with a cooperative somewhere or some kind of independent form. No,
they've been very supportive and just conversations from the beginning, right? I mean, when we first started talking with them about this and about rebuilding Hobbton, they were very, hey, that's great. Just let us know what we can do to help. We're here. Definitely, they are open to selling the property. We just don't want to own it if we don't need it to build some new school.
When we talk about this kind of project and what this means to the community, What are you hearing from folks that encourages you to continue down this road? I know you mentioned the commissioners has been, very supportive of what you're doing. Do you feel like you've got the total support of the community, not only in the Hobbton district, but at large in the county? Because this is going to be a huge, not only financial impact, but down the road, it could also be economic development driver for that area.
Yeah. So I think that's one of the things we tried to not sell, but tried to talk about in our presentation to county commissioners is, when you build a new school, it doesn't just impact the students. It should impact our entire community. It should impact what we're doing as a county. One of the things I've talked a lot is that we need to work more as a school district with our county, with our tourism industry, with our economic impact, right? My kids become Sampson County employees, right? They become people who hopefully stay here, get jobs here, live here, buy property here. Well, we need to make sure then that we have the infrastructure and those jobs for them for when they graduate. And so it does us no good to have, students who are going through pathways that aren't businesses that are here in Sampson County, right? And so we really need to make sure that what we're doing in our school district is reflective of what our district, what's happening here in our county, what's happening in society, because you are correct. The school should be a part of the community. It shouldn't just be, this beacon on a hill. It should be the beacon on the hill that everybody in that community rallies around, that is used not just for school, but is used for community events, that is used for job training. One of the things we've talked about with the new Hobbton is that, because it's so close to the Joe Warren Business Park, that could become a place where any company that builds their businesses there could do professional development, could do training, right? That we could almost, at will change our curriculums to whatever business is coming to the Joe Business Warren Park, so that we can then make sure they have the trained employees for whatever business they're going to do. And that's really when schools become a part of the community, when we're having those conversations, we're having those discussions, so that our kids are going into the right fields.
Yeah, and what I hear you saying, I think is perfect wording to me, because it just caused a little thing to go off up here, which is always good for me. But it's this idea of a beacon, because it does send a signal that the community is not only invested in this property, but it's invested in this idea of building the workforce with the skill set to do things that modern business and industry is looking for. Is that?
Yeah, and I think that's where we're trying to go as a district, right? Is workforce development is of vital importance. And I think for so many years, education has focused solely on college. And college is great. And don't get me wrong, right? Kids who want to go to college should go to college, but not every student's going to go to a 4-year college. And so we need to build in pathways, experiences, knowledge, so that our students who don't want to go to a 4-year college, who want to go right into the workforce, are doing that, but they're skilled. And I think that's where education misses the mark too many times, is we say that we're going to send students out into the workforce, but they're not skilled. And it's our job as educators to make sure that when they leave us, when they graduate, that they have the skills ready to enter the workforce, and not just the entry-level jobs, but they can, go into a job that's mid-level and work their way up, because they have these basic skills that we've taught them, that we've embedded in them. But we can't do that alone. We have to do that with business industry. We have to know what's happening in Sampson County to know what those jobs are and what those career pathways are.
It strikes me as you talked about skills. Again, something fired here that's caused me to think about decades ago, there was something called Trades and Industries programs, which was in essence those tin and iron kinds of things that everything from welding right on around was done in high schools. And some of those old buildings in schools throughout the county still have some of those T&I building, or a building there, and I'm envisioning one now. When we come back, I want to try to get into some of the other things that's going on with schools, looking at curriculum, the changes in curriculum, the things that you're seeing that has to be adapted to the future need versus what we've always done, which sometimes may get in the way. So when we come back, I'd kind of like to use that as a teaser to keep people online here. Ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned and stay with us, because we're talking about key things that's important for your future, for your children or grandchildren right here in Sampson County. We'll be back in a moment. Stay tuned.
For the ultimate Wi-Fi experience, You need whole home Wi-Fi from Star Communications. Star's whole home Wi-Fi provides ultimate coverage, ultimate performance, and ultimate power all the time. Star's whole home Wi-Fi systems feature the latest Wi-Fi 6 technology and are equipped with unrivaled bandwidth and 4 times more simultaneous connections. So you can connect tons of devices throughout your home with no lag and no downtime. Plus, with 24/7 support and remote troubleshooting, you can rest assured that Star is always there to help you should any issues arise. Star's whole home Wi-Fi also comes with the Command IQ mobile app, putting you in control of your home network and making it easy to set up and connect devices, run network speed tests, pause Wi-Fi, and set parental controls all from the palm of your hand. It's the ultimate Wi-Fi experience. Contact Star today to get started.
Let's get out of here.
Protect what matters most in your life with security from Star Communications.
105.7. 105.7. Tuning into Christian 105.7 is tuning in to a space of hope, encouragement, answers, and love. With the magic of radio or the convenience of the internet, Christian 105.7 is focused on sharing the universal truth and light of Christ with a local touch that creates that special feeling of community. More than just another broadcast station, we're your neighbors. Christian 105.7. What faith sounds like.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We're talking about issues today on We Should Know related to public education. And right here in this area, one of the key leaders of that is Dr. Jamie King, who's superintendent of Sampson County Schools. Dr. King, we've talked a bit about a lot of things, but one of the areas I want to get into, kind of on the last part of a couple of parts of the show here, is to talk about some of the practical application things that public schools are looking at now that are extremely highlighted. And just a few years back, it was more academic. And as we were talking on break, you were trying to prepare your way to get into a 4-year college and get a bachelor's degree and focus on something with your master's and possibly maybe even get a doctorate. Now that does not equate necessarily to a high financial income as it did maybe a decade ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think what we've learned is it's more about the skills that students know. It's more about the knowledge. It's not the years of education. And so, working with our community college here, Dr. Starling at Sampson Community College, really trying to build in programs that our kids want and desire, and programs that our local economy needs, right? And so we talked earlier about like the Public Service Academy, right? How many nursing, EMT, fire, police job openings are there that if we train this cadre of folks that are our students that could easily go into that niche, right? And not go to school for 4 years and not have to find a job. There are jobs out there, right? We just need to make sure that we're pushing our kids into the right pathway into jobs that aren't, what I kind of consider, a dead end job, a dead end career, that we're going to put you in this industry, but that's all you're going to be able to do. There's no movement up. And what we want to make sure is that we're putting students into career and industries where there is a ladder. There is an escalation for them, right? They can start at a certain spot and then they can start their own business, right? They can do that on their own. It was amazing to hear about the drone program. We're looking at trying to start a drone program in Sampson County, but to learn that farmers are now using our drones to look at their irrigation and to look at, what's, how much drought resistant their crops are. And that, talking with our own drones here in Sampson County at the 911 center, that they could work every Saturday and get paid thousands of dollars just to use their drones for every farmer. And I'm like, oh my God, we need to add that as an industry that we need to start training kids on, because to me, drones are the little things you play on with the weekend. You buy as a cheap Christmas toy, you goof off with it for a little bit, but then it goes on a shelf. You never play with it again. But to have kids who could really learn to fly drones and do something, one, as an industry and make their way in life, but also to help our local constituents and helping Sampson County. I think that those are the things that we look for of how to help our kids.
When we look at that and we think about the fascinating reality and possibilities there, are we in the process of needing to kind of retrain the thinking process of children in the sense of building wealth can start much quicker through trades than if you spend 6, 8, 10 years in academics?
Yeah, I think the issue that we run into is more that this generation they want to try everything, right? And so a lot of students, what we see now, the trend is to go to a job for 5 years. I go to another job for 5 years. I go to another job for 5 years, right? And so what we're learning is that people, and our young folks especially, they want options. They want change. That they don't go to GE and work there for 30 years and retire with their gold watch. That's just not what society does. And so we have to then change our education system a little bit to help meet those needs, knowing that, most people aren't staying in jobs longer than 10 years. I think the average now is like 7.5 years that someone stays in a job. Right. Well, we have to train our students then in a completely different light, knowing that that's where they're heading. They're not heading to one job that they stay in for 30 years. They're changing. They're constantly looking. And so I would argue that we then have to change a little bit how we're preparing kids to enter into those worlds.
I want to pick up on that last comment, and I think it's important to follow, and this is something I wanted to go to, is this preparing kids, preparing children. When we look at the population and we see a lot of children in needs and different kinds of things that's going on in their lives, I know something that you guys have done is called a Parent University Virtual Workshop. We had, and at one time, I remember a huge part of the process in education was PTOs, parent-teacher organizations, or used to be PTAs, parent-teacher associations. Is there a huge need to train parents now to help them understand what their role is in assuring that child that sits in the classroom that you have oversight is prepared to understand and experience the education process? Explain to us what your thoughts are as it relates to what the parents need to know, and answer that question. Are all of these kids, do they have parents that are there? Yeah. It's a strange world, but I got to approach it from that angle.
Yeah, great question. There's nothing that we can do that outranks what a parent does, right? A parent, you are the first teacher for that child. You are the first nurturer. You are the person who cares intently and solely about, your own child. Teachers will never be able to take that place. I think that as a society, we have asked teachers to take on a lot of that responsibility. We've asked educators to take on a lot of that responsibility. I think on the flip side, schools have also been quick to point fingers at parents. And I talk to my principals about it all the time. Parent involvement isn't just the parent showing up for PTA.
Right.
It's not just the parent who shows up for the basketball game. I argue that if a kid showed up to school, they were dressed, they were fed, they have their book bag, they have all their materials, somebody at home helped them, right? Somebody at home said, "Hey, Jamie, don't forget your homework you worked on last night." That's parent involvement. And we have to stop counting the number of parents who show up for PTA and then complaining, well, only 5 parents showed up tonight. Well, you also had it on Wednesday night when there was church. You had it on Tuesday night where my son had a baseball game. I think we have changed as a society where there's so many other things going on in life. You look at the 70s, 80s, possibly even 90s, school was the center, right? You only played sports at school, right? You only went to your Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts at school or at church, right? Those were your two main things. Today's society is different. I mean, kids are playing baseball and softball for 17 different organizations and 17 different leagues, right? And so because of that, as a family, you have lots of things pulling on you. Well, school open house isn't the only thing on your agenda for Tuesday night anymore. And so we as educators have to understand that. Right. And that's not just how parents show support. Parents show support in lots of different ways. And we just have to change a little bit that kind of theory and storyline that we say of, well, only, 5% of our parents showed up tonight. Well, X% showed up, right? What did they get out of it, right? And we have to change that narrative. And then we also have to do things more on how we look at things, right? I mean, this is an online video, right? Why can we not send information to parents in an online video? Why can we not send it to them so they can digest it at their own time versus having to come to the school, give up an hour or two for whatever we're doing at school, which is important. Don't get me wrong. Those are all very important things, but we just can't take that as the only way that parents show their involvement and show that they care.
And I think one of the things you just mentioned too strikes me is that is oftentimes something of this nature is maybe the only time the parent might get to meet the superintendent and hear your commentary and hear your input. And not only that, but kind of look at what your expectation is. Your expectation as a superintendent with parents may be far beyond what their capacity is, but at the same time, it's an expectation. So should we continue to hold a higher expectation? And I think the key you just hit that struck me is the child prepared nutritionally, material-wise to enter that classroom? And in talking to teachers, sometimes I hear teachers go, I can look around the classroom and see who went to bed and got a good night's sleep. I mean, it's just simple stuff.
It is. It
sounds simple.
Yeah. I mean, I say all the time, education isn't rocket science, right? It's teaching. It's like one of the first professions that ever happened, right? We impart knowledge to someone else. It's stressful. It's mentally exhausting, right? But teaching at its core foundation is imparting knowledge. Like that's a simple task. Now, how we do it when you get in a classroom of 28 kids, right? Now you're having to do it 28 different times. That's where it becomes very complex. But I do think that we have to look at, teaching and education in a completely different light than we looked at it when we went to school and what teachers did, because we ask teachers to do lots of things today that would have never been asked of them in the 90s. Or 80s or 70s. And so we got to really look at teachers and everything we're asking them to do during the day.
Jamie, this is a big, huge pot of things we're talking about here with education. And as we prepare to go to our next break here, I want folks to understand that we're just hitting on key subjects. There's so much more. I mean, you would need a semester of time here just to even cover some of the things that you see. I want to try to make sure folks understand that everybody has a role, and that it's my observation, and you can comment on this, but it seems that we are preparing our future before our eyes in public education. And you see that every day. I mean, I've noticed one of the things you do, you're out in the schools, you're going into these classrooms, you're talking to teachers, and you're seeing students. So when we come back, I want to kind of get an idea of what you're seeing, because your comparative reality is important to folks. I mean, you come from Greensboro and that whole Gifford County area, much larger population base, experience, 70, 100,000 students in just one of the divisions you were involved in. But how does that reflect, and what are you getting? Where are some of the spots? And some of this maybe we don't want to face, but we need to know it. What are some of those spots that folks that are watching this show today want to hear from the superintendent that they need to be aware of, that they can help with? I mean, we do everything in this county. And I'm taking a moment here to do a little narrative to introduce the next segment. But we do a lot in Sampson County, everything from backpack buddies on around. But we want to hear from the superintendent what you're seeing and what your thoughts are. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to kind of follow up on that piece of intro there with the superintendent of Sampson County Schools when we get back. Call a friend, stay tuned.
Providing fewer commutes, more backyard offices, and crystal clear meetings. Providing less, you froze up, and more presence in your presentations. Providing a better internet experience. Providing possible.
You're out for an evening on the town. Finally a chance to relax and forget that you left your front door completely unlocked. Fortunately, you just installed a security system from Star Communications. With just your cell phone, you can check on your house, lock it down, light it up, and get back to relaxing.
You forgot to put Buster in his crate.
Unfortunately, we can't help with that. security and automation from Star Communications. Call today to find out more.
Honey, do we pay our bill?
What bill?
The Star Communications bill.
No worries, honey. With Star's paperless billing and automatic draft system, I get a notification sent right to my phone. There's no need to be bothered with those paper statements, and our bill is paid on time every month.
Well, that's easy and convenient.
It sure is, honey.
Honey?
Yes, dear.
The baby.
Oh, right.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We're coming up on the last part of We Should Know. I'm J.W. Simmons, your host. We're talking about public education today and some of the challenges that folks are looking at, from being a parent to being a student, expectation, reality, new school buildings, and somebody that is in the middle of all of that. And Dr. Jamie King, Superintendent of Sampson County Schools, I almost want to call it a storm that you're right in the middle of, because you see all of this going around you and approaching you at all places, and everything we could talk about today, we're not going to be able to get into. We've talked about preparing students. We've talked about a number of these issues that are ensuring that our children have, excellent cognitive skills and all those kinds of things. But I want to just kind of use this remaining time with you for you to help us see what you see through your eyes as superintendent, and looking at all of the schools and the children and hearing from parents and seeing what's going on. Help us understand what you see and where you want to go as the leader here in Sampson County of public education.
Yeah, what I would say is, first, to parents, your child always wants you there, right? And so, I've been a middle school principal, I've been a high school assistant principal, a middle college principal. And what I see so many times is that, and as a personal father as well, as our children get older, we think it's time to take a step back. And what I would say to parents is, it is time to take a step back, but they're also kids. And kids always want you there. And the more time, attention, email, phone call, whatever it is to teachers, helps teachers to better educate your child. And so it's got to be, the adage of it takes a village. I truly believe that. I truly believe that even my own children, I have to contact and have communication with their teachers to make sure that they know what's going on. And so I would say to parents is, when you go to middle school, high school, it's not the time to take a step back. It's time to take a step up, right? Contact those teachers. You can be in the background more, but don't forget about reaching out to those teachers, talking to the school, finding out what's going on. Because I'll tell you, most teachers crave that and want that to better teach and educate your child. I'd say as a school, I think our biggest thing that we currently face is, drugs and violence. Are probably the top two. I would also encourage parents to become knowledgeable about CBD, vapes, edibles, any of that stuff. That seems to be the number one thing affecting our schools right now. And it's really hard when we're fighting that battle and then we're talking to parents and parents have no idea. They're like, well, it's just a bag of gummy bears. Well, it is a bag of gummy bears, but do you know what they're made out of? Right? And parents are like, no, I had no idea. I didn't know you could just buy that at a store. Yeah. And so we're fighting a lot of battles around that, around education, right? We're even having Sheriff's Department come and educate our board about laws and policies around CBD, vapes, because it's very different than what any of us are used to. And it's not a world that any of us regularly, are in. So trying to understand all the laws that govern it are really important. So I would say that is probably one of the main things that we face. I would say where we want to go is definitely job embedded education, right? I think too many times in Sampson County, we have 4 school districts and 4 schools that are all relatively the same. And I think we've got to come to a point where we use those 4 schools very differently, and we create trades for each of those schools that all of our students can have a choice in. But having 4 ag programs, right, doesn't necessarily help anybody, right? Having 4 auto shop programs doesn't necessarily help anybody. Could we have one of those at one school and then another school focus in on, public service academies? Could one school focus in on technology, drones, 3D game design? I mean, those are huge things, especially if you look at like the Research Triangle part, right? Game design is a huge industry that, most researchers say we've only stepped in. Well, we need to prepare kids for that world, right? So do we do we design one of our high schools around game design and around technology, and design one around ag and one around arts and, all these different things? I think that's where we need to go with Sampson County Schools, is really harnessing the effectiveness of having 4 different schools that we could have 4 different programs designed around. So I think that's really where we're pushing, is more job embedded, more work with our community college and, college programs that may be built into our high schools, but are still through the community college, getting more students who aren't just earning college credits, but earning the right college credits through the community college system. One of the things that we've talked about is also when you look at wealth and debt of students, right? How can we help make sure that more of our students leave us with little to no college debt, right? So how do we build that into our program? Because ultimately that college debt follows them. And if they're coming back to Sampson County as an employee here, well, that debt is part of the money that they could be putting into our local economy, right? So how do we help that? Which is not a typical school system thing that we think of, but that's got to be part of what we think about, right? Because we know that's the number one hindrance for why students don't go to college, is because of the debt. Well, what can we do then, junior and senior year, to help minimize that, to give kids college credits before they ever leave us? So I think when we talk about the future of Sampson County, that's what we're looking at, where we should go. How do we do that? How do we design that? How do we do it the right way? I think more options for students, are what we always look for, to make sure that every student has something, right? That every student can find some niche, something that is their reason to go to school. Because what we also know in research is that that's why kids graduate. That's why school districts are effective, is because every kid has a connection. Every kid has something that they're going to school for. And we've got to figure out what our students need to make that connection. How do we do that better?
One of the things I want to touch on, and you alluded to it there, this is one of the big 4 or 5 that shows up just about all the research I've done. It pops up, and it's the world of AI. How do you see alternative intelligence, which is out there now, and it's really moving? How do you see that impacting public education, and particularly impacting our students and teacher expectation? You've touched on so many things. We could do a whole show just on one of those things you touched on. But that's one of the areas that I keep reading is going to be something futuristically. And I'm really we're literally living in the future, that this AI thing is going to impact not only education, but what teachers' expectations are, what you look at your mission statement as a public education entity.
Yeah, I worry that we're missing the boat on this a little bit, and we're coming, we're arriving a little late. I use AI all the time, right? I use ChatGPT, any of those online things, because it helps me. Now, if you copy and paste it, and this is the lessons we were talking to somebody in the office the other day. If you copy and paste it and use it exact, that's wrong, right? But if you use it as the first paragraph, a starting sentence, you read it and you're like, ooh, I like how they used it. That's how we should be educating kids on how to use those tools. I worry that now we have the blinders on and we're just, nope, it's not allowed, right? Like we blocked it, right? Kids don't have access to it. Well, if we're not educating students on how to use it right, how are students learning how to use it the correct way, right? I mean, I have a daughter that's in 7th grade. Her and I have had lots of talks about how could you use these tools, right? What you can't do is copy and paste and say that it's yours, but you can use it as a starting point. You can read it and be like, ooh, I like these. I'm going to use that for my essay. So I worry that we need to embed that a little more. We need to be a little more robust. I think districts are very worried, especially from teachers, of, well, kids could just copy and paste. Well, can't they do that in Google already? Right? I mean, and so I think it's a lot of fear of the unknown, of teachers not knowing what AI is, what it can do. And I would argue that we have to be better educators to make better assignments. That if someone can just copy and paste an assignment into an AI platform and it gives them the answer, probably wasn't a good assignment to start with, right? But we need to help teach kids, just like we do Google, and teach them how do you find valid sources versus non-valid sources. We got to do the same thing about AI. And if all we keep saying is we're turning our back, we're going to pretend like it's not there, I worry that we're not preparing students for the world that they're going to go into, because AI is a part of every industry now. And we need to teach kids how to harness that.
Should we be looking at a certain curriculum or course in schools to talk about AI, how to handle it, how to validate it, preparing them for that world that's already there, and so when they step into it, they can be maybe cautious in some areas, more investigatory in other areas?
Yeah, I think it's not an embedded self-alone class. I think it should be what teachers do when they're teaching, right? And so, when you're writing an English paper and you're teaching kids about essays and how to research, okay, so you can use ChatGPT, but, or AI or whatever platform you're going to use, but here's how to use it the right way, right? And so I just worry that we're not doing that. And so if we're not doing that, parents at home, we know, don't have the background information, most of them, about AI and what it does. Then who's teaching kids how to use it? And so what I would argue is if we're not teaching them, then what they're doing is copy and pasting, because that's what they think is okay. And, I use this adage, what we don't address, we bless, right? And so if we don't address AI, we're blessing it, right? We're blessing kids using it. They just can't use it on our computers. Well, that doesn't mean anything. They go home and use it on their own. And so I just think that we've got to do a better job of teaching teachers how to teach that tool. And so it should be embedded. It should be in kindergarten. It should be in first grade. I mean, it can't be this thing that just waits till high school. And then we talk to high school students, kind of like what we do about internet safety. We teach kids in kindergarten about internet safety. Well, we should also be teaching, right? We also teach them about Chrome and how to search Google and how to, pick up these things. We should be doing the same thing with AI as we kind of move forward. How do you know a deep fake is not real, right? How do you know this video of the president making a speech? How do you know if it's real or not, right? And so that goes to just where we teach students, embedded in all of our curriculum, how to do that.
We've come up to closing the show today, and as we talked, we could go on and on. Just a quick 10-second closure here. Any last comments you want to?
Yeah, I just think Sampson County Schools is quickly moving. I think we're trying our best to keep up to the pace and make sure that all of our kids have the future that they deserve and can have.
Thank you for being with us today, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being with us. We look forward to seeing you again right here on We Should Know. May God bless.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of We Should Know with host J.W. Simmons. If you have a question, comment, or suggestion regarding this or any episode, please send your emails to weshouldknowedu@gmail.com. And remember to tune in every Tuesday at 2:30 for another informative episode of We Should Know.